The Lake Bodom Murders of 1960 stand as one of Finland's most chilling and mysterious unsolved cases, a true-life horror story that has haunted the nation for decades. On a serene summer evening, 4 teenagers, full of life and eager for adventure, set up camp on the shores of Lake Bodom. Little did they know that this seemingly idyllic night would spiral into a nightmare. In the pre-dawn hours, as a cold mist crept across the water, a shadowy figure emerged, eyes glowing an unnatural red in the darkness. This unknown assailant, armed with a knife and a blunt object, attacked the sleeping teens with ferocity. The scene the next morning was one of unspeakable horror. The tent was shredded, and the bodies of 3 teenagers lay within, brutally stabbed and beaten. Only Nils Gustafsson survived, though barely, found lying atop the tent, his face bloodied and his mind shattered by the trauma. He could only recall a fleeting vision of those terrifying red eyes peering through the darkness. The investigation that followed was marred by a series of blunders. The crime scene was contaminated, crucial evidence was lost, and the police were left grasping at shadows. Rumors swirled around the local area, with some pointing fingers at Karl Valdemar Gyllström, a man known for his hatred of campers. Others suspected Hans Assmann, a mysterious figure with alleged ties to the KGB, who turned up at a hospital in Helsinki with blood-stained clothes just hours after the murders. Yet, despite the numerous suspects and endless theories, the true identity of the killer remains shrouded in mystery. Was it a local madman driven by hate, a stranger passing through, or something far more sinister lurking in the shadows of Lake Bodom? Even now, over 6 decades later, the case remains unsolved, leaving behind an unsettling legacy of fear and speculation. The site where the murders occurred still draws visitors, some curious, others drawn by the eerie, almost supernatural aura that surrounds the lake. The tragic tale of the Lake Bodom murders continues to be a source of fascination, a dark reminder that some horrors refuse to fade away. The case of Joanna Lopez is one of the most perplexing and eerie mysteries to emerge from Chicago in the late 1980s and early 1990s. It all began on the night of January 14, 1989, when WMAQ, a local Chicago television station, ended its broadcast day as usual with a patriotic sign-off featuring the American flag and the Star-Spangled Banner. But what happened next was anything but ordinary. After the anthem concluded, the screen cut to a grainy black and white image of a young woman. The screen was completely silent, devoid of the typical details like the victim's age, height, or last known location that usually accompany missing person announcements. Instead, the screen simply displayed the name Joanna Lopez and a phone number. The eerie image remained on the screen for hours through the dead of night before being replaced by regular programming in the morning. The unsettling nature of the broadcast, its silence, its lack of information, and the poor quality of the image has led to endless speculation and conspiracy theories. 2 years later, in 1991, the same image appeared on WMAQ once again, this time briefly. While the image seemed to have been cleaned up, making it clearer that Joanna was wearing sunglasses, the broadcast still left viewers with more questions than answers. Why was there no detailed information about Joanna? Who submitted the broadcast to WMAQ, and why was it aired in such an unusual manner? Efforts to trace Joanna Lopez through missing persons databases, news archives, and public records have all come up empty. There are no police reports, no family pleas for her safe return, and no evidence that she ever existed outside of these mysterious broadcasts. Some have speculated that Joanna Lopez might have been a victim of Chicago's violent crime wave during that era, a theory that is bolstered by the fact that the city was plagued by thousands of missing persons cases during the late 1980s and early 1990s. However, this theory is undermined by the complete absence of any records or evidence that Joanna was ever reported missing in the first place. The lack of information has spawned a myriad of theories, ranging from the plausible to the bizarre. Some believe that Joanna was a real person who fell through the cracks of a flawed system, her case neglected and forgotten over the years. Others suggest that the broadcast was part of a hoax, possibly orchestrated by someone within the TV station, or a hacker who managed to take control of the airwaves. A more unsettling theory posits that the image of Joanna Lopez might not have been of a real person at all, but rather a digitally constructed or manipulated photograph. Some internet sleuths have pointed out the unnatural appearance of the image, particularly the way Joanna's face seemed almost too blurry to be real, as if it had been tampered with or artificially generated. Despite the growing interest in the case, which has gained traction on platforms like Reddit, no new evidence or credible leads have emerged. In 2022, a few users claimed to have contacted WMAQ, hoping to get more information about the broadcasts. According to them, the station's records indicated that the information about Joanna Lopez was submitted anonymously, and the person who provided it never followed up. This only deepened the mystery, as it suggested that even the station may not have known much about the broadcast. To this day, the identity of Joanna Lopez, if she ever existed, remains a mystery. Her name has become a symbol of unsolved mysteries, of questions that might never be answered. The story of Joanna Lopez is a haunting reminder of how easily a person, or even the memory of a person, can disappear without a trace, leaving behind only a ghostly image on a television screen and the unsettling silence that follows. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is one of the most widely publicized and heart-wrenching cases in modern history, an unresolved mystery that continues to captivate and trouble people around the world. On May 3, 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine vanished from her family's holiday apartment at the Ocean Club in Praia da Luz, Portugal, while her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, dined with friends at a nearby restaurant. This seemingly ordinary evening quickly spiraled into a nightmare that has yet to see resolution. The McCanns, along with their friends, had established a routine of checking on their sleeping children every 20 to 30 minutes while they enjoyed their dinner. At around 9 p.m., Jerry McCann made one such check, noticing nothing out of the ordinary other than the slightly open bedroom door. However, when Kate McCann checked at around 10 p.m., she discovered that Madeleine was missing, and the window in the bedroom was wide open. Panic ensued, and a desperate search began, but there was no sign of Madeleine. In the days that followed, the Portuguese police launched an investigation that would soon come under intense scrutiny. Initial searches and the handling of the crime scene were criticized as inadequate, with potential evidence compromised. As hours turned into days and days into weeks, the search expanded, drawing in law enforcement from both Portugal and the UK, as well as an extensive media presence. The image of Madeleine's innocent face with her distinctive eye defect was broadcast around the world, making her disappearance a global concern. Suspicion initially fell on Robert Murat, a local resident who volunteered to help with the search. However, the investigation soon took a controversial turn when the Portuguese police named Kate and Jerry McCann as suspects. The police suggested that Madeleine might have died in the apartment and that her parents had covered up the incident, a theory that was met with outrage by the McCanns and their supporters. The allegations were based on forensic evidence that was later deemed inconclusive, and the McCanns were eventually cleared of suspicion. Throughout the investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious man near the apartment on the night of Madeleine's disappearance. One of these witnesses was Jane Tanner, a friend of the McCanns, who described seeing a man carrying a child away from the complex. This sighting became a key piece of evidence, but it led to a dead end when the man was later identified as an innocent tourist carrying his own child. In the years following Madeleine's disappearance, numerous leads and theories emerged. One of the most significant developments came in 2013, when Scotland Yard launched a new investigation, Operation Grange, which sought to re-examine all evidence. This led to the identification of a new prime suspect, Christian Bruckner, a convicted German sex offender who was in Praia da Luz at the time Madeleine went missing. Bruckner had a history of crimes against children and was known to have lived in a camper van near the McCann's holiday apartment. Despite this, there has yet to be definitive proof linking him to the crime. The search for Madeleine McCann has been one of the most extensive in history, with millions of dollars spent, countless tips investigated, and thousands of sightings reported. Yet, as of today, her whereabouts remain unknown. The case has been the subject of books, documentaries, and even a Netflix series, each exploring the various theories and possible explanations for what happened on that fateful night in 2007. For the McCanns, the search for their daughter continues. They have vowed to never give up hope of finding Madeleine, despite the many challenges and heartaches they have faced over the years. The case remains open, and while the world continues to speculate, the truth of what happened to Madeleine McCann remains a haunting mystery, one that may never be fully solved. The story of the Baton Rouge serial killer, Derek Todd Lee, is a chilling tale of a predator who terrorized the city of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Lee's reign of terror, marked by brutal violence and a twisted methodology, left a trail of devastation that would haunt the community for years. Derek Todd Lee was a man who, on the surface, appeared to be an ordinary resident of Baton Rouge. He was married with children and worked various jobs, living a life that seemed unremarkable to those who knew him. However, beneath this facade lay a darker reality. Lee was a predator who meticulously stalked his victims, learning their routines and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. His targets were predominantly young women, whom he would follow for weeks, sometimes even months, before finally making his move. The first known victim of Derek Todd Lee was Gina Wilson Green, a 41-year-old nurse who was found strangled in her home in September 2001. This murder was followed by a series of similarly brutal killings, with Lee's victims suffering from a combination of strangulation, stabbing, and bludgeoning. The gruesome nature of the crimes, coupled with the lack of immediate suspects, created an atmosphere of fear throughout Baton Rouge, especially among women who lived alone. Despite the growing number of victims, the investigation into the Baton Rouge serial killer was hindered by several missteps. Early on, the FBI released a profile suggesting that the killer was likely a white male in his mid-20s to 30s, which significantly delayed the identification of Lee, who was African American. This misstep allowed Lee to continue his killing spree undetected, claiming more lives while the police were looking for the wrong type of suspect. One of the key turning points in the investigation came from the testimony of Diane Alexander, a woman who had narrowly escaped an attack by Lee in July 2002. Alexander's detailed description of her assailant helped to refine the search for the killer. Additionally, advancements in DNA technology allowed investigators to link the DNA from several crime scenes, eventually leading them to Derek Todd Lee. By the time Lee was arrested in May 2003, he had been linked to the murders of at least 7 women, although it is suspected that his victim count may be higher. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and in 2004, Lee was convicted and sentenced to death for the murders of Charlotte Murray Pace and Geraldine DeSoto, 2 of his victims. Despite being sentenced to death, Derek Todd Lee never faced execution. He died in January 2016 from heart disease while still on death row, leaving behind a legacy of fear and sorrow. The impact of his crimes on the Baton Rouge community was profound. leading to increased awareness and changes in how law enforcement handles cases involving serial offenders. The story of Derek Todd Lee is not just a tale of horror, but also a sobering reminder of the importance of vigilance and the necessity for law enforcement to avoid assumptions in their investigations. It is a story that continues to resonate, especially for the families of his victims, who must live with the pain of their loss and the knowledge that justice, though served, can never truly heal the wounds left by such a monstrous figure,